Welcome to Sustainably Speaking Africa, a podcast about reshaping narratives around sustainability and climate action in Africa. This podcast is brought to you by the Kenya Climate Innovation Centre and is made at Semabox. Join us for this and other episodes as we talk to industry leaders, frontline communities, and the innovators who are accelerating the progress towards a greener, sustainable future. Welcome again to Sustainably Speaking, and as always, please like, share, and subscribe.
Welcome back to Sustainably Speaking Africa. We are joined by Mr. Joseph Wambugu, who is with Eco Securities, and we are here to discuss everything about carbon markets, carbon financing, and carbon credits. Karibu sana, and thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. As you have mentioned, I'm Joseph Wambugu. I work for an organization called Eco Securities, which is a global carbon developer and a climate finance organization. We pride ourselves as one of the pioneer organizations that started the carbon asset development. We developed actually one of the oldest and the first carbon projects globally in the early 2000. And you'd be surprised that some of our founders who founded the company in 1997 are still around. So you can imagine the wealth of experience we have, the market experience they have gone through, even us who joined the company 2.5 years ago. They have seen the ups and downs, and they have a lot of wealth of experience that they share with us. So I'm happy to be here to share a small experience about my work in the carbon markets, and also help our viewers to understand what is carbon markets and what is not carbon markets.
Yeah. Let's just go straight into it. What is carbon market and what is not carbon markets?
So carbon markets is a market mechanism that was created to pay people for ecosystem services. So it is simply like a mechanism that was thought by the pioneers as one of the easiest way to scale climate finance, because we know there are so many NGOs that have been in conservation, in agriculture, in so many areas, but there is actually no parameters to measure and quantify the output or the impact of, let's say, development money. And development money has always been like sympathetic. It has been money that you give to people because you pity them or because they are in trouble. But carbon markets is actually a payment. It is not money that you just share or you pass down because you have a surplus. It's a system whereby we quantify the impact of everyone, from big to small, even farmers, even women who are in that small kitchen cooking dinner. We try to measure how much impact are they creating towards the benefit of the environment, and then we identify a mechanism to pay them for that. So if your mother or your grandmother was using firewood to prepare your dinner, and over time she has moved to using electric cookers, of course there is no smoke in your kitchen, there are so many things. So we quantify how much of that smoke has been avoided by her transitioning from firewood kitchen to electric kitchen, and then we pay her for doing that. In addition, carbon market, they don't come just as standalone. They are accompanied by co-benefits. So you don't only do change from firewood to electric cooking so that you get carbon finance. You also do that because it comes with other added benefits. Like you save money. If you look at the cost of buying firewood and time spent fetching firewood, you will do so much more with that time and that money when you transition to clean cooking. Something else about health and hygiene in the kitchen, a lot of indoor pollution related to firewood. When you switch to clean cooking, you don't have all those. So it's a whole ecosystem that was very, very well thought, that takes care of everyone, because development organizations couldn't reach everyone, but climate finance through carbon markets, as long as you are doing something good to the environment, it's a mechanism to reach you and pay you for what you are doing for the environment.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to break it down further. a market, a basic market, when we live here and go to the market, has a buyer and a seller
Yes.
and products. So in this case, who is the buyer in your market? The seller, I understand, is me. You've already used my grandmother as an example, moving from firewood to electricity.
Yeah.
And the goods is now, we need a bit of breakdown on that. So who is the buyer? Who is the seller? What are the products?
All right. So the product, it's a virtual commodity or a virtual certificate. So a carbon credit is, in simple term, is 1 ton of carbon dioxide. So either removed, avoided, or reduced. You get the point?
Yes.
So those are the mechanisms to measure. So depending on whatever you are doing, let's say you are planting trees. When you plant trees, from our basic biology, we were told that trees, they absorb carbon dioxide. So what the first step is to come and measure how many trees have you planted. Each tree per year absorbs how much carbon dioxide. And then we package, once we have 1 ton of carbon dioxide, that constitutes a carbon credit.
Okay.
And then who buys these carbon credits? Definitely people who are polluting. So we are talking of governments. We are talking of countries. There are countries that are net emitters because they are highly industrialized. So today we are seeing a lot of government-to-government arrangement to transact on carbon credits, what are being called internationally transferred mitigation outcomes, ITMOs. So a government, let's say Switzerland, will sign an agreement to buy carbon credits from Kenya because they are generally net emitters, maybe not as a whole country, but from a sector. Other buyers would include corporates, organizations that are very well known, let's say Netflix, Microsoft, big one as well as small ones.
Okay.
We have also individuals. There are people who travel quite a lot, people who just know by the nature of their lifestyle, they are net emitters. So they decide voluntarily to purchase those carbon credits.
Okay.
And you can buy those credits voluntarily, or you can buy it by law.
Okay.
So right now in Africa, I would say by law does not apply that much. People are just doing this carbon market voluntarily. Even at global level, we can't speak so much about compliance market where there is cap for emission, and then beyond certain emission, you are required to buy. So in Africa, we will talk more about voluntary carbon credits, but there are mechanisms that are underway for transitioning to compliance market. So there are so many buyers out there, just that they are not buying as much.
Okay.
Yes.
Is there that much to buy? Is the demand meeting the supply? Is the supply meeting the demand?
Yes, I would say there is quite a lot of innovations and investments in climate projects.
Okay.
Like the event we are attending this week by the Kenya Climate Innovation Center. We have seen a lot of startups that are putting money into climate projects that, by the nature of their existence, they are like net zero or, removing carbon from the environment.
Yeah.
Those are the type of projects we are talking about. But because the market has not stabilized to an extent whereby we have guaranteed buyers, so these small developers may not necessarily invest to pursuing carbon credits because there is no guarantee of market. But when the market stabilizes and we have clear signal of buyers and prices, then I think the supply is more than required. And also being in Africa, we know that Africa is, I would say, a clean continent. We host one of the biggest global carbon sinks. We have the biggest forest in the world. We are not industrialized. We still use, methods of production that are not so much polluting. So Africa has the biggest wealth of carbon credits that if we had buyers, I think Africa will grow and industrialized based on the income we can get from the carbon markets.
Okay.
So right now it is being considered as one of the biggest, resource for Africa to move to the next economic growth.
Okay. So the product you mentioned is a virtual asset.
Yes.
But is the payment physical payment? Do I get 1,000 bob on my M-Pesa when I sell my carbon credit?
Yes, a very good question. So when I talk of it being virtual, I would require maybe you to think about it like digital money transfer.
Yes.
You can't touch your money, but you can log into a system and verify how much money you have in your account, how much money you can send or maybe withdraw or something. So the same thing for carbon markets. So there is a registry that hosts all the projects. It contains all documentation with regard to registration document, calculations, and how they arrived at the final numbers. There are the reports from the auditors. You also have the stakeholder consultation documents and agreements. Everything is online, and also it reflects on the available carbon credits that are out for sale, that have already been issued, and also retired. So retired is like money you have withdrawn. You'll go to your bank, even if you have $0 in your bank account, you will be able to see what was your last balance before you got to zero. So that is like the retired balance. So also for carbon credits, you are also able to monitor your project and see how many credits have you been able to issue so far, how many are ready to sell, and how many have you sold and retired. By retiring, it means you simply remove it from the marketplace so that it cannot be bought twice, because that is a malpractice. If you don't retire, it means someone else could send you the money while the credits have already been sold. So that's a very, very transparent process that has been made possible by the registries. And also the transactions, they are also like global transactions. So depending on who is the project proponent is the individual or the organization that is mandated to transact with the registry on behalf of the project developer, because you have farmers, you have communities, all of them cannot have an account with the registry. So there will be someone, of course, who will receive that money, and depending on the community agreement they have, then that money will be passed down through the transaction channels they have chosen. Yeah, so some people pass community benefits in terms of cash transaction. Others, they pass them down in terms of product subsidies. So instead of you buying your improved cook stove or the Jikokoa for 5,000, you bought it maybe for 3,000, an upfront discount that the seller will recover that from the carbon financing. So there are so many mechanisms that must be agreed by the stakeholders on how that transaction will happen in a way that is transparent and verified by independent people.
Okay. Are agents used to be intermediaries between the buyer and the seller? How do we identify who's a legitimate one and who's not a legitimate agent?
Yeah. So I think an agent is a good generic term to use.
Yes.
But normally there is a term I have used, project proponent. And also we have companies called project developers. So like our organization, Eco Securities, is a project developer. A project developer, I would compare them to, let's say, a tax advisor. So if you have an organization that needs to comply to the Kenya Revenue Authority guidelines, most companies may not have that expertise. So they will go to a tax advisor and they will guide you on how to apply, the Kenya Revenue Authority guidelines on your papers so that you are compliant. So on our side as project developers and the so-called intermediaries, we help people who have clean projects. If you have a forest, you have a clean cooking project, if you have a solar plant, we help you to apply the guidelines of the standards. So there are standards that have released methodologies, they have released, guidance on additionality, on community engagement, so many things. So we help you develop the documentation and everything so that when you apply for registration of your project, then it will be compliant. In most cases, there are companies that decide to hire experts to develop carbon credits internally. If you have your company, you say instead of hiring an intermediary, you will hire a team of 5 to help you develop a carbon project. A lot of people have tried that way, but it ends up to be more hectic than they thought, because that's a whole team that you need to build, and you might not need it full time, especially for your business as usual. So for carbon projects, it is very, very normal for anyone to come to a carbon project developer, outsource that service, and you focus on your day-to-day business where you have more expertise. So as we offer our services for a fee, or in certain circumstances, we also become project proponents. So if you want nothing to do with carbon, you want just to focus on your core business, and as we take over the carbon side of the operation on your behalf, we also do that on different commercial arrangements. And we have seen, especially big companies, they understand very well that carbon asset development is a very complex issue that is changing every day, and sometimes they are unable to keep up with the pace, and they prefer to use the so-called intermediaries, but they are not the usual brokers that we know in the agricultural value chains who keep the largest part of the cake. So ours is a recognized, intervention in the whole carbon market value chain.
Okay. You guys are legitimate, but there are so many other illegitimate ones out here. So I go back to trying to figure out whether there is maybe a database, or when I'm doing due diligence, I want to meet someone who says that there are projects, you call them the
developers.
The developers. How can I be sure that this person is actually knowledgeable in this area?
So for every registry or for every standard, they have a database of registered project developers, and also what we call the VVBs, validation and verification bodies. So you don't just hire any individual who does not have an account with a standard or a registry to come and conduct audit or verification on your project. Because I'm not sure, but I think they undergo certain, training procedures on how to conduct due diligence, on how to do verification and audits on carbon project in line with the standard that they are authorized to do that. So there is a standard, there is, I would say, a database and a reference point that you can double check for who are verified to do the work.
All right. I was insisting on that point because there's a lot of misinformation out here, and we were discussing that earlier before we came on screen. What are some of the myths you've heard from Kenyans? Especially, let's go to Kenyans first before we move to Africa and the world. What are some of the myths that you've heard that you'd like to debunk today?
The space of carbon markets, I think it has two type of people who are opposed to it. First of all, there are those who say that carbon markets don't work. They are not yet convinced that carbon credit is genuine. They don't understand at all. Like, for instance, if you go to communities in Kenya, the rural areas, they will say that they saw someone who came to say that they are going to sell their air, like something very weird out of this world. And they were very worried that they might go without air if their air is sold. And we have even seen very big media houses and very big bloggers who have huge following, circulating those misinformation about how carbon credit is going to take land from people. Carbon projects is going to displace people from where they live to other places. So I see a general lack of knowledge and understanding of how the system works. And hence it leads to some people to not believing in carbon markets as a whole. And also I see there are people who intentionally, hide behind stories to fight carbon markets behind the scene, because we all know that this carbon space is coming to fight emissions. So if you are a big emitter, in a way, it will cost you if carbon markets are endorsed. Because ideally, if you don't pollute, you will be paid. If you pollute, you will pay. So if you are a big corporate and you pollute a lot, at some point you will be required to pay a lot, or cut your emissions, or in a way, kill your operations, or reduce your cheap fossil fuel with some expensive clean energies. So maybe I'm not sure of those kind of people, but I believe some forces behind the sources of information we see could be those kind of characters who are like, this thing, we don't want it to see the light of day because it might cost our business in a way. So for me, the biggest myth I have seen is people saying that carbon market is going to take away their land, it is going to take away their air, and then we see qualified journalists, educated climate reporters covering those kind of stories. Unless you report such report as a joke in a comedy show, it shouldn't appear in a serious climate news. So that for me was a bit sad, but it's a myth that I think we need to talk about.
I think so too. Like you've said, there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation, but I think also the challenge for people in your sector is to have conversations like this where you're demystifying some of these things.
Yeah.
As we wrap up, what would you like to see happen in the carbon markets sector in the next 10 years or so?
Yeah, for me, I would like to see clear market signals whereby the market stabilizes, especially on the side of the buyers. Right now, conversations have overindulged on the quality of carbon credits, on integrity, on transparency, and that burden falls squarely on the project developer and the person who is implementing that project on the ground. So if you want high quality carbon credits, it will cost you a lot of money to invest on monitoring, verification, and reporting a system, to hire auditors, to bring in carbon project rating agencies so that you can convince the buyer. But a lot of projects have already undergone that, but there is no clear signal that buyers are still interested even to buy those high quality carbon credits. So my prayer is that as we continue to invest in the quality of projects and the quality of carbon credits, we will also get buyers coming out and saying that we will buy these carbon credits if they achieve these qualities. Right now, the pressure on quality and integrity and everything is being put on the supply side, not by the buyer, but by other forces. Let's say by the regulators, maybe by the government, by development organization, by the media. They are the ones who are raising eyebrows on every gap. And they want all those gaps to be sealed right now, which has never been done in any other sector. So carbon market, that's why I'm telling you, I feel like there are some forces who are like committed to making sure that this market does not move forward. But I am looking forward to a point whereby the buyers we are targeting, we have talked about the big corporates, maybe I'll not mention name. We want them to come out and say, we are committing to buy carbon credits that meet these qualities. And then from our side as developers, we will produce, carbon credits that meet those qualities and maybe even more. And when we do that, we want them to buy. Because right now is a bit draining when you invest in all these integrity credits. But again, you start to struggle on who will buy. And also, I would say the governments are not also helping that much, because there are some processes that we are awaiting governments to accomplish, and they are not moving fast. So we would like also the governments to act fast and with clarity, especially on matters to do with authorization and corresponding adjustment.
I know I'd say that would be our wrap-up question, but you've raised something very important that I think we need to dig a bit deep into. Governments. Which country would you say is doing very well that we can learn lessons from in Kenya?
I would say in Africa or the world. Yeah, so Kenya in Africa is among the best performing countries.
As usual.
In as much as we have lagged behind on almost so many things, but in terms of policy progression and the carbon market framework, our framework is not retrogressive. It has some things that really are not prohibitive to the progression of carbon market. They put some hurdles, but people see them as good for quality and transparency. But now the problem is around some aspects of the frameworks, because let's say, for instance, in Kenya, the carbon market framework says that you only get a letter of authorization once you issue the carbon credits. For us as developers, we see that as a bit too late, because we need that letter of authorization right now when we have not even started investing in projects, because that is what gives you the guarantee that the government will allow you to sell those carbon credits to whoever you want outside Kenya. But without that letter, even investors will be hesitant to come to the country to put money in carbon credits in return to buy them maybe later when they are achieved. But countries like Ghana, they have also made a step forward. They were actually among the first movers to sign bilaterals with buyer countries and also to transact ITMOs and also issue a corresponding adjustment. But the question we discussed in another event about the speed at which Ghana achieved their progress, it was good but not very encouraging. For a very long time, I would say for the last 3 years, everyone has been looking up to Ghana. So many people have traveled there. Governments have sent their delegations to go to and benchmark from Ghana how they are doing their registry, carbon registry, corresponding adjustment, bilateral implementation committees, all those stuff. But after 3 years, but I start to be corrected. I don't remember the figure very well, but they transacted around, was it 6,000 carbon credits? And we were saying, out of all the projects we have the country, out of all the investment that has been put, out of all the good news you have received in Ghana, they only transact like 6,000 credits. It is a good step forward because nobody else has done that in Africa, but it is a bit too small for the size of the market we have. So we had wished that by this time, October 2025, maybe Ghana should be talking about maybe tens of millions of transacted ITMOs. And that would generate maybe sufficient revenue to serve the projects that we have in the country. But just a handful of tens of thousands of credits for all the projects we have is literally not enough. And that tells you that people are putting money into implementation, but revenue is not flowing back in return.
Okay. And what would be the bottleneck for that?
I'm not very sure, but from our experience in Kenya is that the carbon budget has to be gotten right, because once the government starts to issue letters of authorization, that simply means that you are selling your national asset to another country. And remember, each government or each country has its own target to reduce emission, what we call the nationally determined contribution. So they have to make sure that they get the budget right. If they over-authorize and miss their target, it means the government will also be forced to buy carbon credits to meet their emission reduction target. So that has been one of the obstacles and one of the delay points in Kenya, because they wanted to get that budget clear. And then the second point is with regard to the corresponding adjustment. I think, it's actually the same point. So they want to make sure that they want to distribute, the point has come, they want to distribute those carbon credits that can be authorized for exportation across sectors. In Kenya, for instance, the last conversation I overheard, we had around 40 millions of carbon credits that could be authorized to be sold abroad. But that is just a big number. How do we distribute that carbon credits across various sectors? There are sectors that are easy to generate carbon credits. Let's say clean cooking. If they authorize all clean cooking projects, they will exhaust the budget. And then people in complex projects like biochar, maybe clean, let's say, other technologies that are more expensive, let's say like direct air capture, they might not get that share of the cake. So the government need to come out clear and say, this is the overall budget of exportable credits, and this is how we are distributing it across sectors. In Kenya, that one is not yet clear. So people are very much worried that you could develop your project and achieve everything, but when you go to seek for authorization, they'll tell you we have already authorized to the limit, and you can't receive that. So I think they want to get that one clear, but again, their speed is not something to admire.
I think this is a very interesting conversation, and we can go on and on and on, but we need to wrap it up at this point. Thank you so much for joining us. We will have you back. I'm sure this will generate very many questions from people. Like you said, this is not an area that has been well researched or well understood by very many of us. And so we'll have you back. We must have you back to expound on things further. And definitely in the next few months or so, things will have changed one way or another. But asante sana for joining us today.
Karibu. Every day things change in this market. So looking forward to the next one.
All right.
All right.
And thank you so much to our viewers for joining us for this conversation. We'll see you in the next one.